ومن أحسن قولا ممن دعا إلى الله وعمل صالحا وقال إنني من المسلمين.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah ma ba'd. Welcome to our regular Q&A session. Today we have two questions. The first of them, Sister Sajjad emails that she was planning to go for Hajj, but now the government has announced that the Hajj has been cancelled, and so she had saved up some money. Is she sinful in taking that money and using it for her other expenses, given the fact that she is saying their situation is not as financially strong as it was because of the COVID crisis? And also we have Brother Taha emailing, asking my opinion about, is this something permissible? Is it allowed to stop people for coming for Hajj? So this question will be about the Hajj regulations that have come and the fiqh issues pertaining to that. I'll start with the second question first, regarding whether it is permissible or not. In the end of the day, we have to deal with what we are given. I'm not in charge of this decision. It is the Ministry of Hajj and the Ministry of Health that has decided this, and I am sympathetic to it overall. I understand that it is not the wisest at this stage to have millions of people from across the globe come together. The question of whether this has ever occurred in the past or not, well, it is true that in Islamic history, there have been a number of times where the Hajj has been severely impeded. For example, in the year 317 Hijrah, there was an internal revolt, a fanatical sect called the Qaramita, or the Karamatians, the Qaramita. They were a very extreme fringe sect that were on the esoteric, branches of Islam, and they had very bizarre beliefs that they were not considered mainstream Muslims, and they attacked the Kaaba during Hajj in the year 317. Very tragic state of affairs. They actually, believe it or not, destroyed sections of the Kaaba. They hijacked the black stone, the Hajar Aswad, and they took it to their place in the region of Bahrain, and they built a false Kaaba over there. And so for around 20 years, there was no black stone. In fact, in that Hajj in 317, very tragic story, they actually massacred the pilgrims in front of the Kaaba, and they, a'udhu billah, they stuffed the well of Zamzam with their dead bodies. These are stories that a lot of times nobody's even heard of, but these are well-known incidents in our Islamic history, and they reigned havoc and terror for a number of years. And so after that year, when the people heard about this, they were terrified to even go. So for a number of years, the Hajj dwindled to a very small quantity. As well, multiple times, there were a number of civil wars that took place in the Muslim world that prevented large caravans from coming in the 3rd and the 4th centuries. Multiple times, specific regions in the Muslim world were not able to send their Hujjaj. Obviously in the Mongol invasion as well, when the Mongols invaded Genghis Khan, when he invaded, the entire Muslim world was disrupted, and for a number of years, the Hajj was very much symbolic. Very small groups of people came. Also in 1798, when Napoleon invaded Egypt, there were no Hujjaj that went from the entire North African region. So imagine from Morocco all the way, because the Hujjaj would go through Egypt when they come to the Hijaz, to Mecca and Medina. And so when Napoleon invaded, it disrupted the entire, one of the major arteries of Hajj was completely disrupted. Now Hajj went on, but it was not anywhere near the numbers that they were accustomed to. As well, throughout Islamic history, there have been a number of pandemics, or rather I should say cholera outbreaks, because that's usually what occurred, is that there were a number of deadly bouts of cholera, and these affected the Hujjaj. The famous Egyptian historian Al-Jabarti, he mentions that in the year 1831 CE, basically 150 years ago, 170 years ago, 3/4 of the Hujjaj died in Hajj because of an outbreak of cholera. And in 1865, the Hajj killed over almost 20,000 people, and in those days Hajj was around 80,000, so like 1/4 of the Hujjaj. So basically within 30 years, 3/4 and then 1/4 of the Hujjaj were wiped out. And by the way, in 1865, the Hajj actually caused, meaning the people that were interacting in Hajj, when they returned back, it caused this cholera outbreak to spread across the globe, so much so that they even said that, eventually that outbreak even reached the Western world and America. And of course, at this point in time, the British and the French are ruling large segments of the Muslim world. So they're taking charge of the Hajj in the 18th, 19th century. And it's interesting that in the 19th century, meaning the 1800s, after the mutiny, after the British Raj in 1856, 1857, when the British took over, the British had to organize the Pilgrims of India, which was the largest group or one of the largest groups of pilgrims. And because the British are in charge, they have to have a ministry of Hajj, believe it or not. They actually had a person stationed in Jeddah, a British, person, non-Muslim, that's in charge of the Hujjaj and monitoring them. And because cholera was one of the biggest problems, so there were attempts to curb, the quantity of Hujjaj. And of course, this caused a huge backlash because the Muslims felt, who are you to tell us whether we can go or not? And the British felt that, we are in charge of you and you're affecting our ships because you're coming on our ships. Your cholera is going to affect all of us. And so it was, there were always tensions here and there. This isn't the first time this tension is taking place. And an interesting incident took place in 1899. That the famous Rashid Rida, the great alim of the last century, he discusses that in 1899, because of the spread of cholera, French authorities attempted to curtail the Hajj. They don't have the right to ban, but they're ruling over countries. They're ruling over North Africa. They have sections of Egypt and whatnot. And so they attempted to curb the Hajj from their own parties. They can't stop it in Mecca and Medina, but they can stop it in their own lands, or the colonized lands, I should say, that are ruled by these colonial powers. And the French attempted to ban their peoples from going for Hajj, and this caused a huge outbreak because again the French were invaders, the French were colonizers, and the Muslim ulama felt, who are you to tell us that we cannot go for Hajj? And this issue reached the Grand Mufti of Egypt, and great ulama gathered together in 1899 and they discussed whether the French ban should be effective or not. And Shaykh Rashid Rida, he talks about this in one of his writings in Majalat al-Manar, and he mentions that the Rais Majlis al-Nudhar and the Qadi and the Shaykh al-Azhar and the Mufti Dar Misriya, they came together. Amongst them, he said, with Shaykh Abdul Rahman al-Nawawi and Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Rafi'i and others of that era. And they all agreed that the authorities in France had no right to tell the Muslims whether they should or they should not go for Hajj. And they said that just because there's a cholera outbreak in the Hijaz, that this should not stop the Muslims from going for Hajj, and whoever wants to go for Hajj, even if there is a sickness, then they should be allowed to go. Now, this having said this, it should also be mentioned that Shaykh Rashid Rida and others, they mentioned that the French, they had a sinister motive. It wasn't the health of the Hujjaj. In 1899, there was a lot of anti-British and anti-French sentiment going on. And there were people that wanted to get rid of these colonial powers, but they weren't allowed to meet in France, or in the French occupied territories. And so Mecca became a safe haven for political dissidents across the globe to come together and to hatch plans to basically be anti-British and anti-French. And so the notion was, they're not stopping the Muslims from going for Hajj, they're stopping political dissidents from meeting up. And so that was the goal there. In any case, all of this is down history lane. And by the way, just FYI, 100 years ago, as you should all know, this is something by now everybody should know, that the closest pandemic that we should be familiar with is that which took place in 1917 and 1918 in the Spanish influenza, which was global, and it was from the same strain as the COVID-19, the same strain of virus that is there in the Spanish influenza is now present as well in the COVID. And in 1917 and 1918, when the Sharifs of Mecca, they ruled over that region, they did not prevent the Hujjaj from coming, even though the numbers were less than usual. Now, all of this is history. In the end of the day, I'm not in charge. It wasn't my decision. Whether I agree or not doesn't change the fact that Hajj has temporarily been suspended for people outside the country. As for those inside the country, there will be a very small amount. One report said 1,000, one report said 10,000 people, just a symbolic amount that the Hajj will take place. It does appear to me, and Allah knows best, that this might be the first time in all of Islamic history that the Hajj has been curtailed in this manner. But do realize as well that the reason why it is even possible for this to happen is because of the nation states and the visas and the transportations. I mean, you couldn't have stopped the Hajj 500 years ago even if you wanted to. Hujjaj would come from Morocco. They wouldn't know what's going on. I mean, there's going to take 3 months for them to get to Mecca. Visas and stamping them, all of this is now modern stuff, So getting on the airplane, making sure you have your paperwork. You couldn't have done this even 200 years ago. So this notion of is there precedence or not, as I have mentioned in my previous lectures about this COVID crisis, it is not my philosophy that we need precedence in the first place. To be brutally honest, I am not of the mindset that we need a precedent for every single fatwa that is given. As I said in a previous lecture, that this COVID crisis really has demarcated two paradigms from within the scholarly community. It is one paradigm that is completely averse to any change whatsoever, and they're always looking to the past and always looking for precedents, and they're saying who before us allowed this. And I understand and I respect that very philosophically conservative frame of mind. But the flip side is that why are we bound by the views of people 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, with our utmost respect to them? But our knowledge and our circumstances have changed. And had they been alive right now, it is my belief that they would have taken advantage of the knowledge that we have. So I don't need precedence in this regard. Rather, the scholars of our times, we should not do it single-handedly. Neither me nor any scholar should just break away from the chains of all scholarship. We should always have, groups of ulama, groups of people come together and discuss these modern issues. And by and large, as you're aware, that majority of our scholars of our times, they have agreed to this ban from foreigners to come, because we don't want to exacerbate the situation. We now know how these viruses are spread. We know much more about the transmission and safety mechanisms, and this was not known even 100 years ago. It wasn't known. Even in the Spanish influenza, when it occurred, we didn't know what we know now. And so we want to be safe here, and of the primary pillars of our Sharia is the preservation of life. And as for the Hajj, it is not being stopped. There will be a group of people that are going to be going. The Hajj will take place, whether it's 1,000, whether it's 10,000. Alhamdulillah, the adhan will be called, people will be in Arafat. And here's the beauty. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, as we're all familiar with, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. All actions will be judged by intentions, and everyone will get what they intended. And so I was intending to go for Hajj. I had a group of 200 people that were going to go with me for Hajj. So many people were intending to go for Hajj. Insha'Allah, be certain that you had the intention. Allah will reward you for that intention. There's a hadith by Abdullah bin Amr al-As. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إِذَا اشْتَكَى الْعَبْدُ الْمُسْلِمِ, that if the Muslim is sick, Allah Azza wa Jal will say, "Uktubu lahu afdala ma kana ya'mal." Write for him all that he used to do in the best of manners. Go ahead and write it for him. Meaning, the point of the hadith is that suppose you used to pray extra prayers, then you fell sick with a fever, and you weren't able to pray those nafil prayers. Allah will say to the angels, go ahead and write those nafil prayers and give him the maximum reward, just because he had that intention to do, but something came in the way. So here we have as well the intention to go for Hajj, and circumstances came between us and the Hajj. So قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ وَمَا شَاءَ فَعَلْ. Allah decrees, whatever He wills happens. We accept the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we understand that this was a decision that does make logistical sense. There's no need to prolong this crisis as it is. It has created world havoc. Why should we make it worse? Because you have 3 million people that are going to come, and these are all going to go back to their lands. It is a recipe for disaster. Anybody who has gone for Hajj, and I've been alhamdulillah to more than 15 Hajjs, may Allah accept them or even one of them, but anybody who knows goes for Hajj, you are congested. You're living in tight, cramped quarters. You're going to be in crowds that you've never seen in your life. You're in a tent with 15, 20 people. The restroom facilities. I mean, you are asking for disaster with that congestion. It does not make any sense. This is a global pandemic. Why do you want to prolong and delay the lifting of it? So I understand. Obviously, we're all saddened. I was looking forward to Hajj. I needed a break from all that is going on. I needed to go and make dua to Allah and stand in Arafat. I was looking forward to it. Allah knows I was looking forward to it. قدر الله ما شاء فعل. Allah Azza wa Jal has decreed. So inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to go inshallah next year. And all of you who wanted to go this year, you got the reward, and then try to go next year. Now the question that our sister had was that she had set aside some money, and now most travel agents are able to return partially or fully. And again, this is up to you and the travel agent. If they're not able to return fully, then again, that is their prerogative and business, and you need to go to them and find out what can or cannot be done. That's not a Shari'i issue, it's a logistical issue. But the question now comes that she was saying, or she is saying, our sister is saying that she had this money saved up for Hajj. She had intended to spend it for Hajj. Now, the money is there. Whether it was refunded or whether she didn't give the full amount, now she has that money. But she needs that money because the COVID crisis has affected her or her husband's or whatever financial situation. And now she's wondering, is it permissible to utilize that money for her daily expenses? And the response is, there is absolutely no sin on you to utilize this money because circumstances have changed, because the money does not become earmarked and demarcated that you are no longer having access to it. Rather, the circumstances changed, and so the status of the money changes as well. Now, obviously, if you have saved up for this Hajj and you are able to keep this amount for next year's Hajj, then you should do that, because Hajj is obligatory as soon as one is able to go. This is the stronger position. There are two positions in Islamic fiqh, that can you delay Hajj for no reason, or should you do Hajj as soon as you're financially capable. There's a hadith in the Daraqutni, slightly weak, that somebody asked the Prophet ﷺ that when is basically Hajj, you're supposed to go, and he said, Az-zad wa rahila. Now the hadith is weak, but some say it is from the Sahaba. The concept is from the Sahaba, and it is something, it makes sense. Az-zad wa rahila, it means that you need to have enough money to take care of you on the way and on the way back, and you need to have an animal or circumstance or transportation to take you there as well. So what has happened now is that you had the money, the zad, you had paid for the rahila, for the ride, but now you are saying you need this money. So if you need this money and you need to dip into it, need to take all of it, you cannot pay your rent, or you're having problems with your bills or whatnot, definitely there is no haraj whatsoever, there's no sin whatsoever that you take from this money. And if by next year you are not able to save up enough to go for Hajj, the Hajj has been forgiven for you until you are able to save up, and there is no blame on you whatsoever. La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha. That the Sharia is not something that is so difficult. So dear sister, do not feel any sense of blame or any sense of haraj, is called in Arabic. Do not feel any sense of issue. There's no sin on you to take advantage of your own money for circumstances that have now occurred beyond your control. And if you're able to save up, alhamdulillah. If not, then whenever you can save up, then Hajj will become obligatory upon you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us to perform the Hajj inshaAllah ta'ala soon. The next question we have, Brother Shamil from the UK says that someone in his family has terminal cancer, and that the doctors have advised him to use cannabis oil that has both THC and CBD. So he says, part 1, is it halal to use cannabis oil as a medicine, especially in light of the treatment of cancer for his relative? And point number B, that if it is halal, then one of the side effects of using THC is that it puts you to sleep for extended periods of time. And so what can one do with regards to their salah? Is the salah forgiven, or must the salah be prayed in this case? Jayyid. So this question is about cannabis, or the technical term, the cannabis is the technical term. Of course, the popular term is marijuana. And of course, cannabis is a psychoactive drug that is made from the cannabis plant. And the main psychoactive ingredient is THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol. THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. So remember this, THC. Now, there is absolutely no difference of opinion amongst medical experts, among scientists, that THC has mental effects. It affects the brain. And these effects include euphoria, altered states of mind, distortion of the sense of time, diluting one's sense of concentration, impaired memory, impaired body movement. It also gives you a sense of relaxation. And so it doesn't just affect your mental state, it also affects your physical state because it impairs your reaction time and it makes you lethargic. And therefore, it is very clear, there is no doubt that cannabis is a narcotic. This is something that is crystal clear. Cannabis is a narcotic. Marijuana is a narcotic. And the Sharia, the term for narcotics in the Sharia is mukhaddirat. So a mukhaddir, it is a drug that induces symptoms like numbness, like drowsiness, like stupor, like lethargy, like basically wanting to fall asleep. This is a mukhaddir. Now, there is a technical difference between the muskirat and the mukhaddirat. Okay, this is a bit of fiqh here, and inshallah it'll come in handy. We all know that alcohol is a muskir. Alcohol is a type of by alcohol, of course, I mean alcoholic drinks. Obviously, we talked about in another Q&A, I talked about alcohol that is used as a solvent, that we talked about that. We're now talking about beer and whiskey and wine. We're talking about fermented drinks, khamr. Khamr is a muskir. And our Prophet ﷺ said, whatever intoxicates in large quantities is haram in small quantities. This is muskir. Now, according to the stronger position amongst the scholars of our religion, the mukhaddirat and the muskirat are not exactly the same in ruling. Okay? Not every mukhaddir is going to be considered of the muskirat. Okay? Therefore, there are mukhaddirat that are broader than the muskirat. And the mukhaddirat have a different status than the muskirat. The Sharia looks at the mukhaddirat in a different category with a different lens than it does with the muskirat. And when it comes to the mukhaddirat, when it comes to these narcotic substances, the Sharia does look at the uses and the causes. Generally speaking, the mukhaddirat, you can look at the reason why it is used and pronounce a verdict based upon that. Whereas with the muskirat, it doesn't matter what you use it for. The muskirat are all haram. And the simplest example that all of us will understand is that before you do an operation, the anesthesiologist comes and he knocks you out, okay? After the operation, you might have to take morphine, okay? Morphine is a type of mukhaddir, okay? Or when you're knocked out, that's a type of, you can categorize that as a type of mukhaddir. And it is permissible to be knocked out before you get into surgery, okay? That's not muskirat. It is not an intoxication. It is something that has effects that at some level they overlap, but there is also a difference between them. And with this in mind, we also need to, before we move on, so I talked about THC in the cannabis, and the THC is what causes the high or the elation. There is one more substance that you should be familiar with, and that is cannabinoid or the CBD. And the CBD is different than the THC. The CBD is that which causes the numbness or the lethargy. That's different, okay? To feel numb and to feel calm, that generally comes with the CBD. The THC is what makes you euphoric, or your mind goes as you get stoned or you get high. That's what the THC does. Now, both of these substances are present in cannabis. However, how it is produced, how it is manufactured, how it is sold, you have different percentages and concentrations of THC and CBD. I hope that is clear, okay? That the final product, these days in America, almost half the states, they permit cannabis use for medicinal purposes, and very few states even have it for recreational purposes as well. And so the final product, it has many different varieties. It's not just one. And some of these products, they have higher percentages of CBD, and others have higher percentages of THC. And remember, it is the THC that causes you to be high, and it is the CBD that causes you to be more on the calm side. Now, given that overall cannabis or marijuana does indeed cause that feeling of euphoria, along with the clouding of the senses, okay, there is no question that when cannabis is used recreationally, i.e. to have fun, i.e. to get high, when you use cannabis just for the sake of entertainment, right? Just for the sake of fun. There is no question, and I do not know of any reputable scholar that has another opinion, that this mukhaddir will take the ruling of the muskir. It will take the ruling of alcohol, and therefore what intoxicates in large quantities will be haram in small quantities. And that is why the position of all of the fuqaha that I'm familiar with is that marijuana in all of its forms is impermissible to use or to inhale or to in any way ingest for the sake of pleasure and recreation. So marijuana, cannabis, anything that is derived from this, that is ingested for the purpose of pleasure, for the purpose of recreation, it takes the ruling of the muskir, and it will be haram, and anybody who does so is sinful in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That having been said, as we said, the mukhaddirat and the muskirat are not always the same, and therefore there are variations of cannabis in which the CBD component is found in the more higher concentrations than the THC. And generally speaking, it is those products that are said to be of benefit for very, very specific, very narrow range of medicinal issues. For example, epilepsy. For example, to numb the side effects of radiotherapy. So I'm assuming your relative, your cousin, or whoever it is, your sister. By the way, Allah Azza wa Jal cure her or him and make it easy for them and for all of you. It's a very difficult situation, terminal cancer, and I can only make dua, and it's a very difficult situation, and may Allah make it all easy for the entire family. So generally speaking, the cannabis that is prescribed for cancer patients or for epileptic patients, it is a type of cannabis in which the CBD component is the more pronounced one rather than the THC. And there is some discernible effect as far as the modern literature says for very specific issues like, as we said, epilepsy, or like the side effects of some types of radiotherapy, where the CBD does actually have a calming and a soothing effect, and it helps to cope with that pain or with the bouts of epilepsy. And therefore, with respect to medicinal usages, a number of modern councils, including the Fiqh Council of North America, have said that in genuine cases of medicinal need, and every council that says this stresses that don't make it a game. Don't just say, oh, I have a headache and I have a need. Everybody knows that that's what's happening in the modern world, that you just go and say, I have a migraine, I need my prescription for marijuana. That doesn't work that way. That's why most fiqh councils, they say, in order to allow for this concession, because it is going to be allowed in the end, as you already have figured out, you must have a reputable Muslim doctor. Why a Muslim doctor? It's not that we don't trust a non-Muslim, but we expect the Muslim to understand the dangers of opening this door, because marijuana is a gateway drug. Everybody knows this. Every study has shown this, that even if marijuana is not as bad as, let's say, crack cocaine, the Sharia is not based on is it as bad as or not when it comes to haram or halal. When something is haram, no doubt the sin might be worse if it is worse, but it is still haram. Just because beer is not as intoxicating as vodka or rum, it doesn't mean that beer is halal. It's still haram. Beer is haram and vodka is haram. So a lot of our youth, they feel that our scholars are not aware of the fatwas of marijuana and whatnot, and they feel that, it's no big deal. And the fact of the matter is that we are fully aware of this issue, and we understand that it's not as bad as other drugs out there, but it does not change the fact that it is a narcotic. And even if it is the least narcotic, it is still narcotic. And it is a gateway, as study after study has shown, that once you open this door, you want more and more. And so even from the venue of closing the avenues, there's something called closing the doors to evil in the Sharia, Sajjad dhari'a. Even from this avenue, that we're going to shut this door, and also from the fact that there is no doubt that marijuana is a narcotic and a drug, we say that it is haram recreationally. However, as we said, mukhaddir and muskir are not the same ruling according to the more precise definition of the more, there are some ulama, by the way, they just lump them all together, and that's, I can understand that, but it's not the same. And I'll give you some examples at the end that clearly demonstrate that it is not the same. The mukhaddir is not the same as the muskir, and I gave you examples of morphine as well, for example, and others of this nature. Now, As I said here, that the Fiqh Council and others, they have said that if there is a genuine medicinal need that has been testified by a reputable Muslim doctor who understands how evil this chapter is, that it is the lesser of the two evils. If a child is having epileptic fits and taking a type of cannabis, that has CBD in it that calms the epilepsy, or there's somebody struggling with a great amount of pain because of the cancer radiation, and the cannabis helps them to cope with that and helps them to cope with the side effects of not vomiting and whatnot. In this case, it's the lesser of two evils, right? This is not recreational, and therefore, in that case, it will be allowed because the mukhaddir is not muskir. You are never allowed to take muskir for the sake of medicine. Our Prophet ﷺ said, when a person came and said, I drink alcohol to help me, with my disease. The Prophet ﷺ said, it is not to cure, it is a disease. Alcohol, when I say alcohol, I mean, of course, alcoholic drinks. They are the disease. There is never a circumstance that you will take, wine or beer for the sake of medicine. That's not going to work. It's not a medicine, it is the disease. However, the mukhaddir is not the muskir, as we said, and the hadith of the muskirat that the Prophet ﷺ said that it is not a cure, it is a disease, it does not apply to the other category of substances called the mukhaddirat. And it is allowed to ingest that which is mukhaddir for the sake of averting a bigger disaster or a bigger calamity. And I gave the examples of epileptic fits or of people that are having side effects because of radiation or whatever, that if it is noticed and demonstrated, and of course, the doctors, the Muslim doctor will know the cases, then inshallah ta'ala, it is permissible to do. And by the way, just as a footnote here, that this whole conversation about mukhaddir and muskir, it plays a broader role than just cannabis. The classic example here is nutmeg, or one can even say vanilla extract in some sense, even though that's a slightly different case, but still nutmeg is the classic example here. In our culture, in Indian Pakistani culture, nutmeg is very, very common. We use it for many cuisines, and the average Pakistani, Indian, Bengali household, it has nutmeg in its cabinet. And a lot of people don't know this, but in fact nutmeg is a type of mukhaddir, that if it is used in large quantities, and it has been used by the native Indians, they would use it to get high on nutmeg. They have a way that they would do this and they would become high. And every few years or something, you hear a case in the news of some lady or some man, they drink too much of their nutmeg, they have a drink eggnog that they put nutmeg in it, and so sometimes they put by accident or sometimes on purpose, and they become intoxicated by the nutmeg, or they have effects and they have to go to the hospital. So nutmeg is a mukhaddir. Now, is nutmeg haram? If we were to say it is haram, a lot of our cooks and our aunties will be very angry that how dare you are making this haram. And the response is that, well, firstly, some ulama did say that nutmeg is haram because, as I said, some ulama did not differentiate between mukhaddir and muskir, and they said everything that is mukhaddir will take the ruling of muskir, and it is there, that position. However, the more discerning of the ulama and the more research based, and the ones who look in deeper and are not superficial or simplistic, they understand that mukhaddir is not the same as muskir. And this is something that I have many quotes here. So for example, the famous Shafi'i faqih al-Ramli, he was asked in his fatwa, is it allowed to use nutmeg or not? And he said, by the way, nutmeg is called juz al-tib. Is it allowed to use nutmeg or not? And he said, yes, it is allowed if it is used in small quantities. However, if it is used in large quantities, it will be haram. This is one of the greatest Shafi'i Imams, al-Ramli. Also in the Hanafi book, Radd al-Muhtar, again, they were asked about nutmeg, and he said that that which is used فإن استعمال القليل منه جائز بخلاف القدر المضر فإنه يحرم, that it is permissible to use small quantities of nutmeg and other substances. He has a list over here what constitutes mukhaddir. Why? Because in small quantities, as all of us know from our culture, a small quantity of nutmeg has no impact whatsoever. You don't get high or elation or euphoria, nothing. It's nothing that happens. A large quantity will impact you. Now, if nutmeg had been muskir, then it would be haram to take even a speck of it. Because what did the Prophet ﷺ say? مَا أَسْكَرَ كَثِيرُهُ فَقَلِيلُهُ حَرَام. Whatever intoxicates in large will be haram in small. But nutmeg is not a muskir. And similarly, CBD is not a muskir, it is a mukhaddir. So if there is a reason to do it that is greater, and this is something that again you weigh every substance, so don't assume that nutmeg and CBD have the same ruling. They're in the same category, the same genus, they're both mukhaddirat, but then the scholar, the faqih, looks at the impact of CBD, looks at the impact of nutmeg. So yes, nutmeg and CBD are in the same category of mukhaddirat, but the ruling is not going to be exactly the same, because we know CBD does have an impact even at small quantities that nutmeg does not. Nutmeg at small quantities has no impact other than flavor. Absolutely no impact other than flavor. So there is no, even karaha. You can use it without any prohibition, a small quantity for your food to change the taste. As for CBD, it does have an impact, and that impact should not therefore be done recreationally. We don't want to open this door whatsoever. If it is something that is genuinely done for the sake of battling a bigger issue or a bigger disease, then inshallah it is permissible. And I want to read to you the fatwa from the Fiqh Council of North America. You will find it on its website, but I want to read to you so that you are familiar with it. The Fiqh Council has a fatwa that was issued on December 2nd, 2018 on the use of marijuana. Question: what is the Islamic stance on using marijuana for recreational or medical purposes? Answer: the Fiqh Council recognizes that the cannabis plant, which is used to produce marijuana, contains high concentrations of two chemicals, tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, and cannabidiol, which is CBD. THC is the psychoactive and causes consumers to alter their experience of reality, causing them to become high or intoxicated. CBD, on the other hand, does not cause such an effect. The prohibition of alcoholic beverages is well known in Islam. Muslim scholars throughout history have explained that wine was prohibited due to its intoxicating effects, iskar, and that any other substance which results in the same must have the same ruling. Furthermore, the Prophet ﷺ said, every intoxicant is like wine and every intoxicant is haram. Therefore, any use of marijuana which can make a user intoxicated is forbidden in Islam. This is the recreational side. Now, the fatwa goes on. Some contemporary research argues that cannabis with varying concentrations of THC and CBD may be an effective treatment for certain diseases, such as relieving nausea for chemotherapy patients, or increasing appetite for HIV/AIDS patients, or reducing pain for neurological disorders and autoimmune diseases like arthritis. Some preparations of the cannabis plant contain a higher amount of CBD and a lower amount of THC. If these products do not intoxicate a user when consumed in large quantities, they are permissible to use in Islam for medical purposes only. Okay, so this is very clear in this fatwa that if it does not intoxicate and it is needed, and this, as I said, this is when the CBD is the one that is emphasized rather than the THC. The fatwa goes on. There are some preparations of the cannabis plant with higher levels of THC that are claimed to be more effective for certain illnesses when used as medicine. Now we're entering a gray area here. Many scholars of the Hanafi and Shafi'i school of Islamic law accept that it is permissible to use unlawful substances such as pig byproducts for medicinal purposes when there is no alternative available and it is known that the cure lies in the medication. The Fiqh Council adopts a similar position but cautions that these conditions must strictly be observed, since it is common for people to claim flimsy excuses such as minor aches and pains as an excuse to use marijuana in order to get intoxicated. Now before I move on, so the Fiqh Council demarcates two categories of substances. The first of them is that the product that is being used has the emphasis is on the CBD. There's a high amount of CBD and a lower amount of THC. And generally speaking, such substances do not intoxicate, even when used in larger quantities. And in that circumstance, there is really no problem to use these products for medicinal purposes. And by the way, there are certain creams and lotions and whatnot that have CBD and hardly any THC. And if you were to apply, the whole bottle on you, it will not impact you in any manner. That is, of course, permitted because there is no THC, or the THC is so negligible that it has no impact on you. We're not talking about, the fatwa is not talking about that, because that doesn't even apply. The fatwa is saying is that there is an amount of THC, but it's not enough to really bring about that intoxication, and the main purpose would be to combat to have an effective treatment for certain diseases. In this case, they said it is permissible for medicinal use. Now, they then entered a gray area. What if the THC is indeed higher? What if there is an amount of intoxication and the fatwa simply says it's a gray area, really it's a case-by-case basis. Look at the sickness and how bad it is, and is it really worth getting this substance involved? And if there is no alternative, then some ulama have allowed the use of haram. By haram we mean here non-alcoholic haram, because there's, as we said, mukhaddir, and there's, as we said, muskirat, and there's other things as well. So again, pig products, for example, right? I mean, again, the issue comes, for example, there was a case that I had to deal with that the heart of a young girl was, there was some issue, and there was some tissue that needed to be put in the heart, and the doctor said that, for whatever reason, the only tissue that would work is coming from a pig. Okay, and obviously the fatwa here is completely permissible. She's not going to live if she doesn't get that tissue replacement, and so you use that pig part because it is darura. It is something that is necessity, and in that type of life and death situation, then of course it is completely permitted. So the point being that when the pain or when the suffering is so bad and a substance is calming or helping in a certain level, the substance is not going to be muskir, it's going to be mukhaddir. In this case, the Hanafi and Shafi'i schools, many of them, they allowed the use of that which is haram for medicinal purposes if it is proven that there is no alternative and there is cure in that. And the final point of the Fiqh Council is that the Fiqh Council warns Muslims from investing in the marijuana industry, since the overwhelming majority of its business is for recreational purposes. The Council also encourages that more research be done on the medical benefits of marijuana to determine whether there is any other substitutes for the psychoactive preparations of the product in treating illnesses, end quote. In other words, sorry, you can't invest in marijuana stocks. You're not going to get rich off of that, and even if you do, there's going to be no barakah. Do not invest in marijuana stocks. And the Fiqh Council is saying that Muslim doctors need to verify, because we don't know, is this being hyped up, the use of medicinal marijuana? Is there an alternative or not? We don't know. So we encourage doctors, we encourage scientists to do research to find out that is there an alternative that we don't have to worry about there's a mukhaddir or not, and whether this is an actual genuine medicine in these circumstances. Because still, again, I'm not the medical expert, but what I've spoken to a number of doctors in the field, doctors themselves disagree amongst themselves that is this something effective or not. So it's not the job of ulama to give specific prescriptions. The ulama speak in generalities, and the doctors then take those generalities. The general rule has been explained to you, and that is that the mukhaddir and the muskir are not the same, and the mukhaddir can be used if there is an overwhelming need, a medicinal need. And that is why morphine is allowed when you're in extreme pain, even though there are effects of morphine that are generally speaking not allowed. You would not be allowed to take morphine for recreational use, but it is allowed when you need to numb the pain. When you go into an operation, you need to basically be knocked out. That is completely allowed. Otherwise, you're not supposed to do that for recreational purposes. You're not supposed to take anything that will intentionally knock you out. You don't do that. But now there's a greater good, and that greater good is the surgery, is the procedure that needs to be done. It cannot be done when you are awake. So understand this point, mukhaddir and muskir. And generally speaking, mukhaddirat take the ruling of muskirat when they are used for pleasure. Is that clear? That should be very clear now. The mukhaddirat and the muskirat take the same ruling. I need to point out here, they take the same ruling that it is haram. But some of our fuqaha have said that the had punishment will be less for the mukhaddir than it will be for the muskir, and some have said, so again, that's a bit of a controversy about that, it's separate. But they will take the same ruling when it comes to a sin. However, if the mukhaddir is used for medicinal purposes, then the ruling changes and we have a little bit more leeway, as we said in this regard. Now, the final question that our brother had here is that the cancer patient, he says that if he or she has to take it and then they are knocked out, they're otherwise incapacitated, they cannot pray, he is asking, is the prayer forgiven? Or should we have the person make up the prayer afterwards? So to answer this question, we can state that generally speaking, when a person is sick, especially in this type of extreme pain, high fever or terminal cancer and radiotherapy going on, then it is completely permissible, 100% halal, to combine Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha as if you were traveling, right? So just like when you're traveling, you pray Dhuhr and Asr together at one time, and then Maghrib and Isha at one time. So too, when you're in extreme illness or pain, radio, therapy, all of this stuff, it is permissible that you do so. If you are able to take this, substance, this cannabis, this medicinal cannabis, such that you've prayed your Dhuhr Asr, and then you take this for pain relief, and then by the time you wake up, or you're able to, then your Maghrib Isha will come without any haraj, then inshallah that is ideal. And again, so Dhuhr and Asr, you take it as one time frame. Maghrib and Isha, the beginning of Maghrib all the way till Fajr, that is one time frame. And if you're able to do that, perfect. However, if you're not able to, and the pain is too severe, and you are forced to take, and the amount basically knocks you out, in this case, you are forgiven from the wujub of praying, but you are not forgiven from the wujub of qada. So, and this goes back to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that من نام عن الصلاة أو نسيها فليصليها إذا ذكرها لا كفارة لها إلا ذلك, that whoever amongst you forgets to pray or accidentally oversleeps the prayer, then let him pray when he remembers. There is no kafara other than, there is no expiation. You don't have to do anything more other than to make up the prayer that you missed. Now in this case, we can give him the same ruling, even though he didn't forget, but he intentionally went to sleep, but he was excused, like he needed to put himself to sleep or he needed to take the medication for the pain. So in this case, we say that, dear brother or sister, if you must take this medication to battle your pain and it knocks you out, if you are not able to, schedule it such that your Dhuhr and Asr and then Maghrib and Isha is prayed in its proper time, then you may take it. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها وما جعل عليكم في الدين من حرج ولن يشاد هذا الدين أحد إلا غلبه. So many ahadith about don't make Islam difficult. هلك المتنطعون. Those who make Islam too strict and whatnot have destroyed themselves. يريد الله بكم اليسر. Allah wants to make things easy. لا ضرر ولا ضرار. The Sharia has come for yusr, for samaha. There are so many principles of fiqh that state we do not make the religion more difficult. This is a person suffering from terminal cancer. They're having serious pain. Subhanallah, you're going to tell this person that don't take the medication? On the contrary, if they're able to, as we said, schedule, go ahead. If not, take the medication. If you're knocked out, when you wake up, then you make up the salawat that you missed when you were knocked out. And subhanallah, if you're not able to pray standing, then pray sitting. If not, then lying down. This is a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. صَلِّ قَائِمًا فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَقَاعِدًا فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَى جَنْبٍ. Pray standing up. If you cannot, then pray sitting down. If you cannot, then on your side. Whatever situation you can do. And if you cannot even, go to the bathroom, then do wudu in front of you, a little bit of water. If water cannot touch your skin, do tayammum. Subhanallah, don't make Islam more difficult. Allah wants to make things easy, and the Sharia has given you all of these concessions. So the bottom line, and to summarize and conclude, long fatwa, but it was necessary. There is no question that marijuana in all of its forms is haram when it is used for recreation. And I remind all of my brothers and sisters, especially the young brothers and sisters, to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do not take this as a joke. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. You're opening up the door of shaitan when you think that it is a trivial matter. You're opening up the door of shaitan. You're causing issues with your prayer, with your concentration, with spending money. You're causing issue with having companions that are evil. Everything about the industry is evil. And the whole entertainment, the whole issue of this drug, it is a stepping stone, a gateway to far worse than this, and it is something that is definitely sinful in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get rid of this. As for those that have genuine medical issues, and reputable Muslim doctors have said to them that certain compounds that have CBD would help them, inshallah for them it is not the same as the recreational use. And if there is a need, then indeed, and Allah knows, and they have to answer to in front of Allah. You don't come to me, you know whether you need it or not, and your doctor will consult with you. If there is a genuine need, then inshallah ta'ala it is permitted for the greater good, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I will see you inshallah ta'ala next week for our next Q&A. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
إن المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والقانتين والقانتات والصادقين والصادقات والصابرين والصابرات والخاشعين والخاشعات والمتصدقين والمتصدقات والصائمين والصائمات والحافظين فروجهم والحافظات والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد الله لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما.